My mother asked me to sign over half of the inheritance to keep the house in the family. I refused. A week later, I got a message, family meeting. Be on time. I showed up thinking we'd talk. But it wasn't a conversation, it was an ambush. They brought paperwork, pressure, and even a fake notary. But I didn't come alone. What happened next will shock you. I'm Daniel Price. I was 37 when my dad died, though his absence felt like it happened years before. I'd always been the quiet one. Steady job, no drama, never demanded anything. When he passed, I inherited half of everything. The house, the bank accounts, the land. My brother Scott got the other half. But Mom said the house was Scott's to keep. She smiled when she said it. So did he. I loved them anyway. Until I didn't. Before we continue, we share stories like this every day. If you love them, don't forget to subscribe. Kindly leave a comment telling us where you are watching from. We'd love to stay connected. Now let's get into the details of the story. Mom called it keeping the home together. In her voice, I heard a threat. I told her calmly I couldn't give up my equity. It's legal property, I said. She snorted. That's the law. But that isn't what matters. She hung up. I stared at the phone longer than I'd ever stared at anything. What mattered was control. And I owned my half, even if they didn't want it. 2 days later, I got the invite. A text from my mother, family meeting. Sunday. 7 o'clock. No excuses. No RSVP required. No suggestion of agenda. Just time, place, expectation. What kind of meeting demands no excuses? I couldn't ignore it, but I wasn't walking in unarmed. At 6:55, the living room looked as I remembered. Sofas set in somber alignment. Windows silent. Hardwood glinting under chandelier light. Formality suffocated the space. Scott lounged on the far sofa. Same smile. Same posture. Dad's portrait hovered above the mantel. His good-natured face a silent witness. Mom sat beside Scott, arms folded. My sister Jill stood near the front door. She hadn't said a word. Nothing about me leaving her car running years ago, or borrowing money I didn't have. She didn't need to. The room yelled it for her. Mom nodded at me. Sit, Daniel. The lawyer came in behind her, briefcase in hand. Formal. Asked, Mr. Price, are you comfortable? I nodded. Why wouldn't I be? It was my house too. But something tightened in my chest. Papers sat on the coffee table, 2 notarized copies of a deed transfer. Clean signatures. One for Mom, one for Scott. One blank line for me. Scott flicked his eyes to the paper, then to me. Just a housekeeping matter, he said. You dig this out of Dad's desk? I clenched fist below the table. My name's on Dad's will. I own half, I said. Calm. I matched the tone. Scott rolled his wrist, as if to say good luck. Mom's lips thinned. The lawyer opened the file. Shall we begin? I reached into my coat, pulled out a slim envelope from my jacket's inner pocket. Mom stiffened visibly. Scott's smile vanished. Jill took a step closer. Mom's voice was soft. Before we begin, I looked at her briefcase. At the stranger's smirks. Then I said it. Before we begin, my attorney has a few questions. I slid the envelope across the coffee table. Legal eyes flicked. A moment broke. Their plan shattered. Mom's eyes flicked to the envelope, then to me. She smiled. Like she still thought she could win. I'd hired a lawyer before coming. No one else knew. Not Scott. Not Jill. Not Mom. I'd spent days digging through Dad's accounts. Followed mortgages she diverted into shell trusts. Notarized deeds she drafted years ago. Signed documents she claimed were lost. He left me half that house. I wasn't giving it up. Scott's jaw tensed. He cleared his throat. Daniel, this isn't how we do things. I sat up straighter. There's no more we here, I said. There's the law. That deed acknowledges my ownership. Those shell companies are going to unfreeze. He leaned forward. That's not fair. I smiled. Fair pays taxes. Not hiding assets. The lawyer closed the file. I have questions for and about these documents. Mom looked stricken. For the first time, I saw fear. Not of losing the house. Of losing control. Her voice quivered when she said, Why bring a lawyer? I answered, Because I didn't bring an inheritance. You tried to take mine. Silence. An earthquake passed through the living room. That portrait of Dad hovered like a judge. I thought about what he'd say. Maybe he'd nod, Or maybe he'd say I was cold. I could handle either. The lawyer spoke next. Terms. Timelines. Probate freezes. The notary's name. The rules of engagement. I nodded, took notes. The room changed. It went from den of entitlement to courtroom. I sat there fully aware of how far this had gone. I didn't flinch. I wouldn't flinch. Because this isn't a family meeting. It's a trial. And I'm representing myself. At 8 o'clock, the lawyer closed his notebook. If there's nothing further, we'll follow this process. He stood. Mom looked at me, pleading for a truce. But this wasn't war to me. It was justice. I'll be filing tomorrow, I said. She closed her eyes. Scott leaned back, silent. Jill looked away. No one spoke. They left one chair empty between us, like I wasn't part of the set. But that chair was mine. Fully mine. I stood, picked up my coat, collected the bill of sale and for sale sign she'd already prepared. I nodded to her lawyer. Thank you for coming, I said. They turned, walked out. Mom didn't follow. Jill stayed in the doorway. She didn't say anything. I walked out too, left the light trailing behind me. I locked the door, walked to my car, sat there with engine off, and I exhaled. The storm wasn't over. It was just begun. I never mentioned the support I'd given until now. I called 2 banks the week before the meeting and asked for transcripts of every transfer to my family from the past decade. I got a stack of statements thicker than any book I'd read. Credit card bills, roof repair checks, backdated cashier's checks, emergency ACH transfers. They were meticulous in their receipts. I sat in my apartment and flipped through all of it. No one ever said thank you. But now, I'd say enough. Flashback first. Scott after his DUI. I wired $5,000 for bail, legal fees. He said he'd pay me back. He never did. Then Mom called last spring, roof leaking, mold growing. I wrote a check for $12,000, no explanation. She called me a few weeks later, casually, in passing. That was just family, right? I said nothing. Just fix the leak. The grandparents' property tax accident? That was $8,500. Check's clear. But thanks never did. Now, seated across from them at the dining room table, I opened my laptop and connected it to Mom's lawyer's tablet. Those transfers? I pointed to a dated chart. Deposited from my account. Direct to your accounts. Mom clutched her hands. Scott's brow furrowed. I laid out the terms. Not generosity. Obligation. The transfers included notes, tax, roof, student loan. No gifts. Contracts. One-sided contracts, but contracts. And now I was calling due. My attorney, Grace Solis, eased forward. Mr. Price is alleging financial manipulation, undue influence, and coercion, she said. I nodded. These transfers were conditioned. Family leverage masked his love. No shock. But faces changed. Jill sat forward. Scott's mouth dropped. Mom bit her lip. None of them saw it coming. They'd assumed I'd stay silent. They counted on it. But silence is expensive. And I didn't intend to pay anymore. I clicked forward. We froze the probate account this morning. Funds can't be withdrawn. The house equity's locked until this is resolved. Mom pressed her lips together. Scott glanced at Jill, doubt growing in his eyes. You can't do that, he said. You need the house. I matched his tone. I need what's mine. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't need drama. The calm did it. Cold. Methodical. The room finally filled with tension. One I'd orchestrated carefully. Mom sniffed. Daniel, that money wasn't meant to hold against us. I pulled up the transfer records. You recorded them as expenses for the estate. Just called them roof repairs. I attached the debit memos. The entries read like ledger primes. DP to MP, roof. DP to SP, legal. DP to JP, repairs. Every record logged prominently in Dad's QuickBooks. I didn't guess why I'd been forgotten. I proved it. Evidently. In black and white. Scott's voice cracked. We didn't ask for notes. Grace leaned forward. That's irrelevant. The law sees this as loan funds used by recipients without repayment schedule. That makes them assets. Yours, Mr. Price. The room shuddered. Mom blinked. Jill's face turned pale. Scott's legs shook. They'd convinced themselves this wouldn't defend. They thought coercion existed only in fists, not spreadsheets. But tools can kill. Silence can kill. I just decided to stay alive. I paused the files and leaned back. I'm not asking for gratitude, I said. Just accounting. And boundaries. Mom shook her head, the last piece of her smug armor collapsing. I didn't know you'd record it. I nodded. You didn't thank me, either. The lawyer closed the case, stood. We'll file this by morning. And I heard the fractures, Scott's inhale, Jill's stifled sob, Mom's silent unraveling. I didn't feel cruel. I felt calibrated. I watched as Scott scrambled for his phone. Called someone. Probably his accountant. Give me a second, he whispered. This doesn't feel negotiable. I quietly shook my head. Nothing is negotiable this time. The hush tightened again. I didn't mention why. They didn't need reminding. The binds of family loyalty used to mean I'd stay quiet. But loyalty isn't a leash. It's supposed to uplift. If it weighs you down, cut it loose. Mom's chin trembled. You're breaking us. I stood, walked to the window, my back to them. I'm freeing us. I flipped through the files on my laptop to the forged notary documents I'd pulled from the county archives the week before. And if anyone's tried to manipulate my signature in the future, I smiled. We already have exhibits. I paused for effect, then closed the laptop, clicked power off. The silence held. I dropped a large binder on the table, thick enough to leave a dent. Everything you've done to me. I kept receipts. The words landed like a verdict. I stepped back. Grace gathered her things. Mom looked at the binder as though it would bite. Scott stared at me like he was seeing a stranger. Jill stood behind Mom, teeth clenched. I never let my anger drive me. My proof did. I walked toward the door, collected my coat. I didn't need to watch them unravel. The lesson had been delivered. Outside, my attorney slipped me an envelope. File these by Monday. I nodded, walked away. Door clicked behind me. I exhaled for the first time that morning. The ledger was open. The quiet fury served. They'd assumed I'd stay meek. That assumption just cost them. And maybe, just maybe, it freed me. I never planned for the courtroom to be my stage, but my hand had been forced. The night I dropped that binder, I didn't just gather receipts. I lit a fuse. For days later, my lawyer filed the lawsuit in probate motion, claims of financial manipulation, forgery, and undue influence. The court docket flashed to life with urgency. Plaintiff seeks injunctive relief regarding property and estate assets. That phrase changed everything. My family's secrets became public record. No whispers, no apologies, just legal precision. Early the next morning, alerts popped up on my phone. Scott's business line flagged for default notices. Bank freezes. Margin calls. Mom's credit cards were declined. I watched from my office window as her Cadillac stalled outside, no ignition. I didn't gloat, but I didn't regret it, either. They had leveraged their power, my money, to prop up their illusion. Now the illusion burned, and I'd brought the matches. The house that supported them wouldn't crumble under my weight. It would topple under the truth. I dropped evidence files at the County Bar Association. The forged notary stamps on 2 deed transfers. One for Scott, one for Mom. Dad's signature? Sloppy, obviously reproduced. The bar took the papers. Within days, they launched preliminary complaints. Not just civil trouble, they'd tangled with professional ethics. My mother's lawyer called me. This is unprecedented. What are you doing? I told him quietly. I'm unearthing the foundation. It can't stand on lies. Meanwhile, Scott called. Frantic. They're pulling my credit line business loans. He pleaded for a meeting. I offered none. I sent his message to my lawyer's folder, Exhibit K, admission of loss. He couldn't afford to keep up. His business collapsed faster than mine had grown. I watched from a distance as the empire he hushed in brunch posts swayed and fell. The same empire built on my money and hidden signatures. Mom reached out too. One email. Daniel, I'm begging you, let's settle. I forwarded it to Grace. She drafted a cold reply. No settlement. No negotiation. This proceeds through court. That was it. No judge. No mercy. Her only play was time. She needed my silence. I refused. They tore at my inheritance as if it were theirs by birthright. So I fought with law. Not loyalty. Not family sentiment. Just law. Press picked up the breaking story. Inheritance lawsuit rocks quiet suburb, read the headline. Neighbors called asking if we were okay. It was surreal. I needed their voices. The public narrative mattered now. Every scoop, every social media thread, kept the lens on my mother's dishonesty, my brother's fall, and the legitimacy of my claim. I was no villain. I was a whistleblower. They had buried a truth. Now I unearthed it. Court hearings followed fast. I watched from the gallery as Mom's lawyer fumbled attempts to downplay the transactions. They were family gifts. Judge's pen hovered. Then the forged deed was laid bare. The forger's stamp. The mismatched signatures. The lack of Dad's true notary record. The judge paused the hearing that day. Ordered temporary freeze. Ordered production of all signatures and phone logs. Mom's face loosened with realization she had no defense left. Scott showed up outside the courthouse that evening. He tapped the glass of the cab I was leaving in. His eyes desperate, confused. He mouthed, "Help me." I shook my head. The cab pulled away. He's old enough to know the price of privilege. He's young enough to pay it now. No help with the cab fare. No inheritance check. I drove home. The leather seat still smelled of victory and smoke. That same night, a voicemail popped on my phone. Her voice, trembling. "Daniel, it's the sheriff's office. They're here. Please, can we talk?" My thumb hovered over play. I didn't answer. I let it hang for the morning. Let the hush of accountability wash over it. If authority arrived at their door, I wanted to know about it secondhand. I didn't need the adrenaline. I just needed confirmation. The law was doing my work. I filed for a press briefing. Spoke carefully about accountability, transparency, and the price of secrecy. I positioned all this as cautionary tale, not personal vendetta. That night, I closed my laptop. I opened the scholarship note I'd framed. "Your proof we can win." I touched the glass. It didn't glow, but I felt it, in the slow pulse of rightness. And when I returned to the courthouse next morning, they were all there. Clients, lawyers, reporters, cameras. The judge entered. He looked at the petition, then at them. His voice was measured. "We will proceed with full discovery." The freeze stayed. The lead attorney was rescheduled. Verdict unseen yet, but the firestorm had begun. My rally cry had become their reckoning. That evening, I replayed the voicemail. The sheriff's number, my own county. Whoever's door he knocked on. That wasn't for me, but it was certainly for someone. The storm had just hit land. When the judge granted my petition for a forced sale, I felt something inside me expand. It wasn't triumph, exactly. It was relief. The house, that looming entity of entitlement, would no longer be their trophy. That morning, the auction list appeared. Pinewood Drive, 1962 Colonial, appraised at $620,000. I clicked bid under Grace Saffron Investments, LLC. No one recognized the name. At $325,000, I became the highest bidder. That house was mine again now. Quietly, legally reclaimed. As auction adjourned, I watched Scott and Mom through a windshield. Their faces held disbelief. I felt no glee, only clarity. My conflict wasn't with walls or windows. It was with the betrayal they built inside them. When contractors arrived, I hired them under my name. Not to restore or rebrand, but to strip it down. No preservation. No sentiment. Just demolition. Kitchen gutted. Carpet stripped. Fireplaces emptied. The house would remember nothing I did inside. Scott called, voice shaking. "Please, Dan. Can I buy it back?" I looked at a nail-popped wall. Held my breath. "You can't," I said softly. "But you don't have to." I felt his chest tighten, the echo of guilt. Mom sent handwritten letters, notepad prayers. "Dear Daniel, please, we miss your laughter." I kept them in a drawer. I recognized sorrow, but not sincerity. Not now. The house would no longer echo the guilt chains I'd worn, and they could no longer buy me back. I repurposed the real estate license and nonprofit paperwork I'd started months ago. I registered Pinewood Transitional Housing, built for young men aged 18 to 21, estranged from abusive families. The Colonial became dorm rooms, study lounges, a small kitchen. I hired counselors, managed grants, hosted community fundraisers. Every nail and floor plank was proof that names, family names, don't define you. Foundations do. I bought a broken past to build future hope. Construction crews worked line by line under my supervision. I visited early mornings, mid-construction, late at night. I carved office corners into memory alcoves for mentors. I built bunk beds where framed graduation photos hung. I designed the common room for open mic nights and mentor talks. Each drywall sheet nailed was a quiet exorcism of the betrayal buried inside those walls. And each time I looked at the house, I saw potential, not legacy. Local newspapers ran articles. Former inheritance scandal ends in second chances. One story featured me handing keys to a young man named Carlos, 18, recently kicked out after a strained custody battle. I guided him into his bunk. He looked up, teared, nodded. Reporters snapped photos. I sat beside him, offered coffee. Nothing said revenge like offering sanctuary. That photography captured me more fully than any courtroom moment. One morning, construction finished. I turned the key and opened the front door, inhaled stale drywall dust and fresh paint fumes. Inside, the floorboards were polished, bunk beds arranged, a mural of Dad and me painted by the local art center. I placed a wreath by the entry door. Second chances. But something else needed placement. I walked to the reception desk and removed a photograph from my coat pocket. It was Dad, smiling, holding the deed. He looked proud. He looked hopeful. Not ownership-less. Not scared of sons who chose empathy over entitlement. I hung the photo center stage in the reception hallway, right by the welcome desk. No fanfare. Just context. Then I stepped back and waited. Opening day arrived with ribbon cutting and small crowd counselors, social workers, young residents, some volunteer carpenters. Scott and Mom weren't invited. I pressed scissors to ribbon and cut. I welcomed Carlos in front of the crowd. He took his room keys. Camera flashed. Parents and kids cried. I held back. The house hummed with new energy, life. Not legacy, but I tasted something fierce and final, the quiet ownership of a conscience. Later, I took a moment alone in Dad's photo hall. I stood before the image. Then I exhaled deeply. No apology. No reassurance. Just honesty. I asked myself, is this enough? The silence answered. Yes. My heart hadn't broken. It had softened. In the gutters of betrayal, I'd planted refuge. In the echoing hollows of entitlement, I'd created shelter. It wasn't revenge, it was redemption. I turned and walked out the front, leaving Dad's photo behind. The door clicked shut. I didn't look back. Not because I was cruel. Because grief is held at the front door. And I had lost enough already. I walked away toward a rising crowd, toward new chapters, toward therapy sessions and shared meals. I left the silence of the house behind, but not forever. I had built something better in its place. Inside that house, betrayal went adaya. And empathy came to stay. A year had passed since the ribbon cutting. I lived quietly now, far removed from courtrooms, lawsuits, and cold legal battles. My mornings began in the same Cochise Avenue apartment I'd moved into after Dad's death. No framed family portraits. Just a sparse desk, notes for the Pinewood Foundation, and a single framed document above my mantel, my personal trophy. Not a deed, not a diploma. The fake will they forced on me. Burned around the edges. Blackened with finality. Labeled Exhibit A. I called it my guard. I hadn't spoken to Mom in months, no phone calls, letters, or messages. Moments like her, full of pressure, guilt, regrets, weren't discussions. They were histories I'd archived. Scott declared bankruptcy 6 months ago. His company folded, debts written off, but dignity lost in sprawl of court notices. The newspapers even ran it. Inheritance fallout. Local brother forced to close doors. I never called him. I never visited. We'd lost what they stole. I'd feared silence. Now I embraced it. The Pinewood Foundation chugged along. Grant-funded, volunteer-run, built for people like me, quiet victims of inheritance strife. I attended monthly board meetings, approved housing scholarships, and offered mentorship sessions under stringer lights. I saw kids like Carlos again, older, stronger, rebuilding from homes scarred by betrayal. They reminded me of what loss could create. That's what grief did. It reshaped, redesigned, sometimes redeemed. I found calm in helping them write new stories, ones that didn't involve forced documents and broken trust. One afternoon, I invited a probate attorney to speak at our offices. They arrived with notes and a presentation, Beware of Quiet Heirs, Testamentary Coercion in American Families. I stood silently backstage, watching lawyers and social workers lean in. I thought how surreal it was that my name, once whispered by family lawyers as that brother, was now seen as a case study, cautionary tale, precedent. I had climbed from ashes to headlines, from embarrassment to empowerment. The irony was intoxicating. I met with my own attorney at a downtown cafe that morning. She slid a box across the table that rattled. I didn't open it. Not yet. A gesture of restraint. Inside? The prints of all official documents that accused us, Mom, Scott, of forcing a forge will on me. The judge officially dismissed those documents as fraud. Civil penalties issued. I nodded, slid the box back. No celebration. No applause. Just a step further from premises that once said, "You don't belong." That night, I drove by Pinewood House. The lights still shone through the front windows. Through them, I could glimpse the photos, the laughter, a new crowd filling a reclaimed space. My heart felt full, smaller, but deeper. My phone buzzed. Invitation to my cousin's wedding. My grandmother's memorial. Family gatherings. I locked my phone. Declined them. Not out of malice, but self-preservation. Why attend a reunion of people whose only presence had been their absence until inheritance forced them? I kept one final relic at home, the framed fake will. Its charred edges whispered significance. I hung it in a low-lit room where nobody came. Part of me worried I'd someday pour it in lighter fluid and burn the whole mess. But I couldn't. It was Exhibit A, my safeguard. It wasn't hatred. It was memory, Al. Handcrafted truth etched in ink and scorched in rage. I closed the curtains as evening light fell. I didn't sleep until I touched it. Then I did. Weeks later, Pinewood hosted its first Thanksgiving for residents, volunteers, mentors. I carved turkey in an open kitchen while classical guitar echoed. Kids laughed at swap jokes. Some counselors cried during grace. I stood in the back room, letting it happen quietly. When the meal ended, I stood with my hand over my heart. And it felt like I was home, not where I'd been born, but where I'd chosen to build. My family now looked different, but it loved me fully. In my line of work, birthdays, holidays, reunions, they began to echo with potential rather than obligation. I hosted a New Year's community dinner in Pinewood's courtyard. I lit lanterns, offered resolutions, and hot cocoa. My life wasn't perfect. None of this erased the pain, but it filled it. I saw so much hope shimmering in cold reflections. Proof that darkness doesn't have to last, that you can rewrite endings when you decide not to sign someone else's script. On my 38th birthday, I hosted a small dinner at my apartment, some Pinewood grads, a couple of foundation board members, a local attorney friend, and me. I carried in a chocolate cake. We ate at the table I'd bought secondhand. I couldn't lock out every memory. I thought of Dad. I thought of the house and fires I'd set inside it. I didn't believe in fairy tales anymore, but I believed in intention, and I offered that, instead of excuses, to those who sat with me. That night, I fell asleep smiling, not because I had won, because I had left. I left so far behind lies, guilt, false voices demanding surrender. I left so I could come back, to myself. I read the new will I'd written, one that said anyone forced to sign a lie forfeits all claim to its consequences. I hung that on my wall, never to sign anything again without looking at it first. I didn't need more family approval. I needed boundaries, built and signed. They tried to write me out of my own story, so I rewrote the ending with their ink. And that's how I turned a family ambush into generational justice. They expected silence, obedience, surrender. But I gave them the one thing they never saw coming: consequences. I didn't just keep my inheritance. I rewrote the legacy. And if you've ever been the scapegoat, the quiet one, the one they thought would just take it, you already know. Revenge isn't loud. It's precise. It's legal. And it lasts. If you found that story as satisfying as I did telling it, there are more where that came from. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss the next story. See you soon in the next one.